Hello, everyone. Hello. I'm your host for this session. My name is Danny. I'm going to be hosting this roundtable discussion. You will hear very minimal from me. I want to create as much time as possible for you to have a really good conversation because I've done this before, and the more time you have, the more beneficial it will be for you. You should have a facilitator on your table. Can I ask Trish to put her hand up? So Trish, he's a facilitator, the lovely Trish. Could I ask Tom to put their hand up? There's Tom. Paul Matthews, there he is, nice. Paul Tiller, there he is. Joe Cook over there. And we've got Sarah, there you go, at the back, nice. So those are our facilitators. They'll be kind of facilitating and making sure that the conversation is nice and rich, and they'll also be potentially the ones feeding back at the end. So we're going to kick off in a moment. I'm going to take you through the questions. So there's 2 questions that I would like you to discuss on your tables. You'll have about 30 minutes to discuss this. So really get in there and put some meat on the bones. I will also at some point throw in a bogey question that I know you guys will appreciate. That will help the conversation flow really nice. We'll have about 10-15 minutes at the end to feedback. And then if there's any time, please, just throw in any questions and we can make it a bit more informal. Let's do this. So, guys, in your tables, please, the first question is, what does a learning culture mean to you? Yeah? What does a learning culture mean to you? And then the second question is, what actions have you taken or could take to establish and embed that learning culture? Yeah? I'll leave the questions up. If you can discuss that in your tables and just think about somebody to feedback and present back after the discussion is finished. And I'll be going around making sure the conversations are flowing nicely. Let's do this. I have no more to say. It's all about you guys. Let's get involved. Okay, guys. I did say to you that I would throw in a bonus question. It's a bit of a burning subject. Just would like you guys to discuss on your tables. There is I'd like to call a 4th industrial revolution happening right now. And it's around AI and machine learning. I'd like you guys to discuss on your tables, have you thought about AI, how you incorporate machine learning into the world of learning, development, and the things that you're doing within your organizations? It might be something to talk about. If you've thought about it, what you've seen, how you would incorporate it, do you know much? Have you started investigating? Because before you know it, it will be on our doorstep, and it's better to embrace it than it steamroll over you. So maybe something to just talk about in your tables. Yeah? Thank you. Okay, can I ask you to wrap up your conversations? This won't be the end. I'm going to get each table to feedback, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for anybody who just wants to kind of share anything burning, any insights they feel the rest of the kind of the group would want to know. So I will start with Joe. Are you able to? Can we get Joe to feedback on our table what was discussed? And then we'll make sure each table gets the feedback.
Hello everybody. So we've got quite a diverse range of organisations on our table. So therefore we had quite a diverse range of conversations. One of the things we started talking about was the dichotomy between the development that our senior managers have and what happens at the very operational side of the organisation. And in one case in particular, it's just like, actually the operational side is really woolly. That's not their word, that's mine. Because it was really difficult, the work that they do. So when we're kind of looking then at that culture of learning, it's about, well, it's all very well and good that they go and get an away day, but what about the people who just stuck with the compliance tick boxy learning? And I am seeing lots of nods. So this is something that was obviously discussed on other tables. And the learning culture in our table, a lot of what we talked about was ownership of the individual and the initiative to be able to go and do something, and not just kind of that compliancy learning that's kind of pushed upon them. And with regards to the establishing and embedding the learning, a lot of challenge. Just things like what some of us might think are basic bits around feedback on learning. One organisation, their managers were sort of saying, well, why is that my job? Why should I do that? Whereas we know that how important that is. So then we got into the AI part, and I think there was that element of we're using AI to help do our jobs, to cut down on just some of that hard work. But then a really insightful question, I thought, was, well, that's great, we've got our skills and us using AI, but what about the people in the business or the organisation coming to us, asking us to help the business use AI? How does that work? So I thought that was a really, really brilliant question.
Great question. I've got an answer to that particular question, but I will not say anything right now.
Danny. I thought you would.
I will not say anything about that right now. Can I get Paul Matthews to feedback? Thank you.
Well, I better stand up since Joe stood up. Defining a culture with several different things thrown around. Again, a diverse range of things here. Willingness to have a go, experimentation, sharing. And one of the comments that was made is learning is the oxygen for the company, which I thought was quite a nice way to sort of talk about how important it is in the whole concept. Yeah, I like that one too, Danny.
I might have to steal that.
And then the other angle we started looking at that from is, okay, that's your view of what a learning culture is. If you went to one of the employees on the line, what would they say is a learning culture to them? And that was a very different story that came back, because of course what they think of as a learning culture is the reality you've got to work with rather than what you think. So that was the first question. The next one was, how do you embed it? And amazingly, this fine gentleman here from BT, they've just launched a program just last week.
Nice.
Called Time to Grow, because one of the things that came up as a barrier to the learning culture is the time that people have. So they have now mandated amongst the trial group at least 2 hours a week on average that employees must put into some kind of learning initiative. And it's on average, so it can come and go depending on what's there. So they've only just started. And it's being driven by the managers. Clearly it's got a very high level of executive buy-in, because if you spread that across the whole of BT, that's a massive commitment in terms of hours and things. So they're going to see how it goes. So hopefully watch this space. We'd love to hear how that gets driven. A number of other ways of doing that. And then we got into the idea of learning, people learning in business because they want to do something, hopefully, to get engaged with that learning, and the only way they're going to do that is if there's a leader out there saying, there's a wonderful place for us to go, let's all go there together. So if you have a lack of leadership, you've got a lack of need or desire of people in the organisation to make any change, and if they don't need to make any change, why would they bother learning anything? So even if you provide time to learn, e-learning and other things, why the hell would they engage with that if the leader's not saying, come with me, it's really good for you to get involved with this, let's go. And then they'll say, well, I want to be involved with that. So the quality of leadership, to me, has a massive impact on the desire of people to learn, and therefore the learning culture that exists. So we talked about AI, but it's a lot of the same stuff we've all covered before.
Thank you. Can I get Paul Tiller? Hey, Paul the Tiller man. The Tiller man.
There you go. As a committed nonconformist, I will stay seated for this.
That's fine.
So we had a really, really good discussion around learning culture, and the fact that obviously moving from the push of training culture, where the organisation owns the learning, to the pull that really should be there, where the learners own the learning, and asking the question, well, what else have we got? So I think there's a piece in there around reflective practice and going, I've done this, what's next? I think that's really, really key. If we can get to that, 100%. It's one of the key markers for me of a learning culture. We sort of extended our conversation then around safe to fail, and making sure that the learning culture is there to support people when they put their hands up and go, yep, that was me, I screwed up. What is there to support me and help me going forward as well? One of the things that was very interesting in our discussions here is that, well, we live it, but not everybody does. So it's about having that learning culture being lived authentically throughout the organisation as well, 100%. And that's a key thing. So then as we sort of flipped over and then started to look at the second question, it was really, it was again saying that we need to model that, as L&D professionals, and also we kind of got to sharpen our elbows and push the profession to the forefront as well, because otherwise it falls flat very, very quickly. Marika, you shared a really great example around, and it sort of ties into the safe to failure piece here, around an initiative where there's an amnesty bin in your organisation around behaviours, and people can actually almost declare their own failures where they said something that probably isn't right or has hurt somebody as well. And that, and there's almost not quite the full confessional, but there's a mechanism there for people to really declare where they've fallen short in their own activities, and then can take learning and to move forward from that as well. And I thought that was really good because it kind of avoids the playground tittle tattle and gossip and allows people to own their own mistakes and own their own route forward as well. So which reduces that tittle tattle and increases trust. We then did flip onto the AI question, and it was really interesting that, again, amongst the four of us on the table here, half of us have had experiences where it's just not allowed in my organisation, and it's still not allowed in a lot of organisations. So we sing and dance all around here about AI all day long, but actually you can come back to the workplace and the gates are down. So there's a question. Again, it depends on the industry and the nature of the work that you're doing. Obviously, a lot of us work in more sensitive areas. So the security implications is still a big cloud that sits over AI.
Very good point.
But then on the flip side, Dwayne had a great example where instead of hiring 20 voice professionals to do 10 language sales interactions in a two-way, you chuck it at AI and get it done in a minute. So there's this kind of yin and yang. So I think AI's got, sort of summing up the conversation here, AI has got a job a job and a purpose and some utility, but it's also got a job to do to answer the questions around the security and are we letting something dark and mysterious into our data.
Thank you very much. Great summary. Can I ask Trish? Thank you.
So we zoomed out and we said, okay, under what circumstances do people even need to learn versus look something up? So what would make it worthwhile investment of effort, time, energy, cognitive load in an already complex organizations in a very complex world? Like, when is it that it makes sense in order for people to learn? And is that really something that we have to push or impose, or is that something that we can pull that's already embedded in the culture, that we can provide the systems and the processes that actually helps to facilitate learning rather than something that we're dictating as far as learning is concerned? So some of the things that we shared about how it is that you might do that, setting up those conditions, we talked about storytelling, and not just storytelling from the organization or like the L&D function, but actually peer-to-peer storytelling within segmented populations. And so we were talking as an example with pharma, and you have different, of course, types of workers in a pharma environment. So the stories that might resonate with a scientist, as an example, is going to be different than other members of other parts of the population. So how might we use storytelling as a technique in order to be able to help knowledge transfer, help learning to occur, especially in different moments of need? We also talked about from then being able to embed it. Again, it's already there. So how do we continue to draw it out? And we actually talked about the difference between, again, learning and lookup. So we had a really cool conversation about Captain Sully and landing the plane in the Hudson River, which then actually tied into artificial intelligence, which I'll explain in a moment. So we were talking about that some of what's come out of that incident is that he was able to land the plane, to even think about doing it, because he had learned to fly gliders. And so when he lost both engines on that flight, he had the presence of mind in his training. He had enough training, decades of training, in other high consequence, U.S. Navy, I think, high consequence situations where he was able to get the mental faculties in order to make a judgment call, and then basically decided to land that plane like a glider. But he could only do that because he had the intuition, he had the muscle memory in order to be able to do it, but he also had a checklist. So once he made the decision, which came from the training, which came from the inside, and came from that intuition, he also had something that could then guide him in that process. But we had a conversation that it came out in court that if artificial intelligence had been used in order to help Sully guide or make the decision of what he could have done, would he have still decided to have landed the plane in the Hudson, or would he have tried to go back to the nearest airport to LaGuardia? And so what Glenn was sharing was about, they ran the models, the simulation, to say they could have made it. Like if he had made the decision to go to LaGuardia, he would have made it. And what Captain Sullivan said was, well, wait a minute, I'm a human being. It took me 30 seconds or 45 seconds to process this. Rerun the models after that amount of time has passed and see if we still would have made it to LaGuardia, and they would not. So we were talking about when it comes to, we're so conditioned now as human beings to listen to our machines. Our phones go beep, they buzz. We listen to our Fitbits and our iWatches. Like, there's automation bias. At what point do we make a decision to actually counteract whatever it is that the machine in that moment is guiding our behavior to do? And how are we conscious of that as we go forward? And then the last thing, we talked about Formula One racing. And Formula One racing, they've had real-time feedback with the drivers on the course for a really long time. It's part of the culture. So where, again, does that come from? Like, it's already there, it's already embedded, and they're using artificial intelligence in Formula One racing in order to improve the performance of those drivers while they're on the course. So there are appropriate times when we do want to take the guidance from the machines, but how do we in our organizations think about that? We're changing the relationship of our people with the machines, and what relationships are going to be appropriate with the machines and what relationships would not be appropriate, and how do we then tell the difference in these guidance systems?
Thank you. It's a very good summary.
Yep.
Can we move on to Tom and his group? Thank you.
I won't stand because you won't be able to see the difference. So we really got started with a discussion about time and availability, not necessarily desire. We kind of all agreed that there was a desire to learn to do your job well, but perhaps not always availability in terms of either the sheer number of hours you work or in terms of availability in the case of NHS staff, because if someone needs your help, that probably comes first in the real world, right? So how do we work around those challenges? How do we meet people where they are? We kind of got onto the discussion around how often do we go to people and say, hey, what would be helpful? Rather than us coming up with a marvelous idea, how often do we consult with those we want to build a culture for, rather than deciding what the culture should be based on our, infinite and supreme knowledge of the universe? We then kind of moved on to the kind of actions that we can take. And we spent some time talking about, is it content that drives culture? Is it the people that drives culture? Is it the organization, or is it something more organic? Is it a deliberate action? We never really got to an answer. You might find that shocking, but we didn't quite get there. We kind of came to the conclusion that it must be a combination of all of these things in different measures at different times, but that one alone certainly can't achieve it. Then AI came up, just as a little added extra. I think the way I would describe the group's reaction to that was excitement at the opportunity, the possibility, and quite a lot of concern about the potential risks, and more so the unknowns around those risks, around data, around security, thinking about the medical profession. How comfortable are we with AI getting its hands on that data versus just something we put into ChatGPT? There are degrees of concern that we need to be considering here, but definite excitement around the possibility of quicker, more efficient content that can really react and discuss things with the user, rather than something being something we've preordained to be the right way forwards. I think that's pretty fair about what we said. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Great summary. Thank you, Tom. And lastly, Sarah's group.
Thank you. So we started talking about learning culture, and what we sort of started with sort of formal training that people do, and talking about the company actually supporting that training and making it happen. And then we talked about it becoming more learner-centric, didn't we? And talking and that it's people driving what they want to learn rather than the business driving what they think people should learn. And I've broken my glasses, which is why I'm like this, so bear with me. And then we moved more on to sort of the culture, and we talked about having curiosity. We talked about having a growth mindset, didn't we? We talked about the freedom to make mistakes, having psychological safety, and employees recognising that they always need to be learning and you know, in order to move forward. And then some of the actions we talked about, because one of the things we talked about was having a lot of older people that need to impart their knowledge to younger people. So one of the actions that people have been doing is getting very involved in apprenticeships, written a competency framework which helps people to develop their roles, mentoring. And then we talked about curiosity, and someone gave the example of a session that they were running that was called Share My F Up. So basically that was about sharing mistakes that you'd made, and that was in a digital company. So different ways to kind of try and change the culture and make learning part of everyday life. And then we talked about AI, and we were talking, a few people have used it and really found it absolutely fantastic, especially if you've got only 3 or 4 people working in L&D. You know, you can create a course in seconds, or you can compare skills from different job profiles, put them in, and it'll pick out what the main skills are. You know, things that could take you hours and hours, you can use AI for. But again, talking about using it with caution. And we talked about security, didn't we, as well? If you're in a particularly, say, pharmaceutical industry or something like that, you might not want to put in certain information. So that was a quick summary, but...
That is an excellent summary. Thank you, everybody. Round of applause for everyone. End of the session. So, guys, we are now at the end. There's not really time to do insights towards the end, but there's one thing I will say quickly. I organised, because it's an answer to Joe's question quickly, I organised probably one of the best training I've had in the last year and a half. Organised a session. If you guys are interested, please message me on LinkedIn. Organised a training by a training provider where they came in and spoke to our senior leadership team as part of our senior leadership meeting, and they taught us. It was a 2-hour fun interactive session on the top AI platforms that people are using right now, how to use them to improve your work and the things it can do to save time. It was phenomenal. It has absolutely revolutionized some of the way some of our leaders work in some of our departments. Same thing with my team. So if you're interested in this, let me know, and I'll tell you who the training provider was. Embrace it. It is the way forward. And if your sector doesn't mind, then I would definitely endorse it. Just the thing to say, guys, there is now a drinking network session from 5 to 6 for the delegates, which is free. And lastly, before you go and get alcohol, because that's all we want to do right now, can I get... Oh, hold on a second. Have I gone the wrong way? Where is it? Yes. Can I get you guys to scan this QR code and please fill in the delegate feedback? It does not take long. It's a few minutes. And then you are welcome to go to the networking bar and get some drinks. But please, if you can, that would be great.